I wasn't alone on Poveglia Island. The first thing I noticed was that the island had no light, not a single one. The boat engine was the only sound cutting through the darkness as we moved across the Venetian Lagoon. Ahead of us was Poveglia, a completely black shape surrounded by water. My friend Marco was standing at the front of the boat, staring at the island. He had been joking the entire trip. He stopped joking when we got close. "Are you sure this is where we're supposed to go?" I looked at the GPS. Poveglia, exactly where we were. Our boatman didn't say anything. He just slowed the engine. Then he pointed toward the shore. There was a small wooden dock, and beside it, a man was standing. I couldn't see his face. He was just standing there, waiting. Our boatman looked at him, then looked at us. "I didn't arrange for anyone to meet you." Before I could answer, the man walked away into the trees. Marco laughed nervously. "Maybe he's the ghost we're here to find." Nobody laughed. We stepped onto the island. The boatman told us he'd wait outside the restricted area. We had about 40 minutes, then we had to leave. I remember looking back at the boat before we walked away. The boatman was still sitting inside, watching us. We entered through a broken section of the old building. Inside, the air smelled of wet concrete and something metallic. Our flashlight beams moved across peeling walls, broken windows, and old hospital equipment. Everything looked abandoned. Then Marco stopped. "Look." There were footprints on the floor, fresh footprints. They started near the entrance. They went down the corridor and disappeared around a corner. We looked at each other. "Someone's already here," Marco whispered. We followed them. The footprints led upstairs, one floor, then another, until they stopped outside a room. The door was closed. Marco slowly pushed it open. The room was completely empty, except for one thing: a hospital bed. It was covered in dust, except for the center. Someone had recently been lying on it. There was a clean impression in the dust. I walked closer. Something was sitting on the pillow, a digital wristwatch. I picked it up. The screen was still on, 11:17 p.m. Marco looked at me. "That's weird." I turned the watch over. There was a name scratched into the back. Luca. Our boatman's name was Luca. We ran downstairs. The corridor was empty. We pushed through the doorway and looked toward the shore. The boat was gone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Marco shouted, "Luca!" Nothing. We ran toward the dock. There was no boat, no Luca, just black water. Marco pulled out his phone. No signal. Mine had no signal either. Then his phone rang. He stared at the screen. His face changed. "What's wrong?" He turned the phone toward me. The caller ID showed his own number. His phone was calling itself. He answered. For several seconds, nothing. Then I heard a voice coming from the speaker. It was Marco's voice, but it wasn't live. It sounded like a recording. His own voice whispered, "Don't come back inside." Marco slowly lowered the phone. That wasn't me. Then we heard something behind us, a door closing. We turned toward the hospital. Every door along the ground floor corridor was now open, every single one. They had all been closed when we came outside. And somewhere deep inside the building, someone was starting to walk, slowly, one step, then another, Marco grabbed my arm. "Run!" We ran toward the dock, but the dock was empty. The water was completely still. Then an engine started. We looked across the lagoon. Our boat was there, maybe 50 meters away. Its headlights were on. The engine was running, but there was nobody inside. Marco started shouting, "Luca!" The boat began to move toward us, slowly. No one was steering it. It came closer, closer, until it reached the dock. Marco jumped inside. I followed. The moment my feet touched the boat, I heard someone behind me. "Wait!" I froze. It was Marco's voice. I turned around. He was standing inside the boat. So who had spoken? I looked toward the island. A figure was standing at the hospital entrance. Marco, same jacket, same height, same face. He was staring directly at me. I looked back at the Marco beside me, then back at the island. The figure on the island raised one hand and pointed toward the hospital. Marco beside me whispered, "Don't look at him." I couldn't move. The engine suddenly roared. The boat pulled away from the island. I watched the figure disappear into the darkness. Neither of us spoke for the entire trip back. When we finally reached Venice, I immediately called the police. I told them our boatman was missing. I told them my friend had seen someone on the island. The officer looked confused. "What boatman?" "Luca." He shook his head. "There was no boatman registered for your trip." I thought he was joking. Then he showed me the harbor security footage. There we were, two people walking toward the boat, me and Marco. I pointed at the screen. "See, that's him." The officer paused the footage, then zoomed in. My stomach dropped. There was nobody beside me. I was walking alone. I watched the footage again, me getting into the boat, me leaving the harbor, me returning hours later, alone. I couldn't explain it. I called Marco. His phone rang and rang. Then someone answered, but there was only silence. I looked down at my phone. A new photograph had appeared in my gallery. I hadn't taken it. The picture showed the hospital corridor on Poveglia. At the very end stood Marco. He was facing the camera. Behind him was the man we'd seen on the dock, and underneath the photograph was a timestamp. Tomorrow, 11:17 p.m. I stared at the screen. Then I noticed something else. The photograph wasn't taken from inside the corridor. It was taken from behind me, from exactly where I had been standing, and whoever took it was still there, because in the bottom corner of the photograph you could see the edge of my shoulder, and a hand resting on it. I dropped the phone. I haven't been back to Poveglia. I never will. But every year, on the same night, my phone receives another photograph, always from the island, always at 11:17 p.m., and every photograph shows Marco standing a little closer to the camera. The last one arrived 3 nights ago. This time, he wasn't standing on the island. He was standing behind me.